You're listening to the Discussing the Resilient podcast, hosted by Aidan Smalley and William Reid, a competitive 40k podcast for the servants of Nurgle and the fallen 14th Legion. Tactics, meta-analysis, and all things Death Guard. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Discussing the Resilient podcast. This time it's just me, Will. By now you probably recognise my voice. So this is the second one in my solo series. Poxwalker to Plague Me, and I think we've been sort of lovingly calling it. Where basically I'm talking about my improvement in 10th, the things I've learned, the mistakes I've made. Kind of just sort of like, you know, rather than sort of focusing on, you know, being a great player and the things that I've done well and have done, you know, done well with games, kind of focusing on the mistakes I've made, you know, things I've noticed, how I've sort of, you know, come to improve and things I'm sort of going to further improve, and also talking about list decisions, you know, sort of why I've thought about this, you know, and deliberately also part of this series taking lists that are a little bit different. Maybe it's not, you know, completely sort of rewriting the script, because at the end of the day, you know, there are only still so many list options, and you know, I think there's a lot of people out there trying a few different Death Guard archetypes, so I don't pretend in any way to be some kind of like visionary or anything like that. So following on from the last episode, so just a quick recap. So basically the series started because me and Aidan both attended an RTT, and I had done I'd underperformed from my own expectations. And what I say, I don't mean that in any arrogant way. I don't mean in the sense of, I expect to do really well, you know, if I don't go through, you know, I'm really upset, because I'm not that player. I'm a 2-1 player, that's what I aim for. And if I don't get 2-1, you know, I try not to beat myself up about it. But this particular RTT, I'd lost because I basically just made loads of silly rules errors, you know, made me realise that there was, I have a basic grasp of the sort of 10th rules, but I didn't have the knowledge that I think I would have liked to have done to sort of go to tournaments. And I mean, I talked about in the last one, so I won't recap in great depth, but I played Mikey from Hellstorm, and I made a howler in my first turn, and it sort of cost me the game from that point onwards, really. I mean, maybe a better player could have sort of played out of it and sort of found some tips and, well, not tips, because obviously found some tricks is probably a better phrase. Found some tricks to sort of get round it. But as I say, so the idea that's what sparked the idea of the series. Obviously, Aidan's cracking on all of his solo stuff as well, and me and Aidan are still doing the shared podcast together. Obviously, the episodes we'll try to do one every couple of weeks, where we talk maybe more like about broader topics and things like that. Obviously, Aidan's doing his Faction Fundamentals series, so if people are looking to deep dive specific factions, you know, Aidan did a great one really about how to play against Necrons, which I actually listened to myself. You know, I'm a Death Guard fanboy too, and I also learned from Aidan and the other guests we've had on the podcast as well. Also did a really interesting talk, which is going to link back to this one actually. We recently interviewed the other people who went 4-1 at LGT, and they both played fixed secondaries rather than playing the cards. And that sort of inspired me to maybe have a go at playing fixed myself. I'm thinking I might sort of force myself into it for this next RTT, where I'm going to take them, you know, even if I don't think it's probably the right thing to do, take them, see how badly it goes, and try and just sort of like get in that mindset and sort of, you know, force myself to sort of test them out. And, you know, maybe some of the third episode of this series, assuming it continues to get traction, sort of talk about those experiences, the things I've learned, the mistakes I've made. I have actually already played a practice game with them, so I might sort of recap some of that onto this as well, and talk about that. But I suppose the first thing to do is maybe sort of recap on the two events, because last time I said I mentioned got 3 RTTs come this month, kind of quite quick sort of time periods between them. So the RTTs I went to, the first one was in Liverpool at Just Play. Great guys, great gaming centre. Would highly recommend it to anyone who sort of lives in the who lives within a couple hours or further if they're looking to travel to Liverpool. I actually finished second at the event. Now, with both these events, I'm going to caveat this, you know, and like I say, I did okay at both of them, but there were smaller player pools. There were 8 to 10 players. I think both had 10 players actually. So, you know, out of that, there was a couple of players taking it more serious than others. A few players just bringing the models that they thought were fun and just to get the games in, you know, as you always get with events. But obviously when there's a smaller event, you know, it's a bit different. So I don't want to sit here and be like, oh yeah, I came second and went undefeated. You know, I'm an absolute G, because I'm not at all. Like I made some mistakes, and one or two of the players in particular were a lot more casual than I was, and were making mistakes where I was sort of watching them sort of do things and thinking, should I sort of help them and point out the mistakes they're making? And I offered to do it at the end if they sort of wanted to, because some of them were quite basic errors, which actually links to one of the things I'm going to talk about on this particular series, something which I think is an interesting topic of conversation. Obviously, you know, people can talk about the comments as well. Maybe, I know we've got the Discord now as well, which Aiden's set up and launched, so maybe it could spill over into there. And that's about fair play and gamesmanship, and what is player skill is one of the things that I wanted to touch on this particular episode, because talking about the game, so I'll break them down quickly. So it's kind of a bit weird doing this for anyone who's listening. I'm basically just sat looking at myself talking to a computer screen, so I feel a bit like in some sense I'm going mad, just having a full-on conversation with myself. But at the same time, you know, it's how podcast content works. I'm sure there's lots of people who are just nuts, but not having a chat or anything. I'm literally just talking into the void. So the first one in Liverpool, first game I played against another, I suppose, content creator, a lot more well-known content creator as well, a gentleman called Tim Vass, who kind of is to Imperial Guard what me and Aiden are to Death Guard, I guess. Tim Vass is a really good player. He likes to run sort of wacky lists, so in that sense he's got a bit more in common with me than Aiden. He's the, you know, often sort of someone running 300 guardsmen, or this particular list, he'd signed up quite late and had let his Patreons pick his list for him. So to recap on my list, I stayed true to what I said in the last episode, so if people can go back and get a deep dive on the list, because that's kind of what the first episode was, an introduction to the list I said I was going to play for at least the first two, and the third I'm going to make some tweaks, and obviously we'll talk about that later in the episode. So it's basically it's a silly skew is what I call it, but at the same time it's a silly skew. It is also, it's very rock paper scissors. You know, like to a lot of armies I am the rock to their scissors, but to some armies they're the paper to my rock. Tim Vass's list was probably, I felt, the paper to my rock, if I'm to be totally honest. I felt like he had a guard list. So my list basically, so to recap very quickly, it's 3 carnivores, 2 effective blow drones and flesh mowers, Mortarian, who is flying as a beat stick going forwards. He's not really playing as a buff piece, so he can be if he needs to be. 3 Predator Destructors, I think they are. So one with the autocannon on top, so you get the 4 flat 3 damage shots. And then 20 Plague Marines, 4 squads of 5, and 2 Rhinos. So only 1 character, very deliberately, because I'm so heavy on the vehicle skew that I am bleeding bring it down, and I don't want to give up even 1 secondary. Even if someone takes cards against me, so they draw Assassinate, I want it to be a card that it's a really hard 5 points to get. So it's a very conscious thing that I'm doing that. It's not because I don't think Typhus or, you know, Lord of Virulence and Death Shroud, it's not that I don't think they're good. Also that my Plague Marines could probably benefit from Biologist Putrefier or Foul Blight Spawns. So, you know, obviously those are other archetypes, and I am going to maybe talk a little bit about another list I'm looking at as part of this episode, where I am considering throwing some characters in. But that's my list anyway. So here's Tim Vass's list. Was both Baneblade variants. Now Tim Vass lovingly said he didn't have much anti-tank in his list, but then if anyone who's ever played against Guard and knows what the Baneblade, each variant's like, how many guns it has and what those guns profiles are, you'll know that there is a lot of anti-tank compared to most armies in there. Maybe there's not lots of instances, you know, maybe it's not like I have 10 units all with a Bright Lance or a Dark Lance, you know, as an example. They weren't spread across his army, but the 2/3 units he had with guns had big guns, and those guns were the things that my army did not want to see. He also had a few guardsmen, not as much as you would expect. He had, I think, 1 or 2 big bricks of 20, so he wasn't, you know, flooding the board with object bodies. So I did have a bit of an advantage in that sense, because I could spread my Plague Marines out. You had a couple of 3-man squads of Bulgan, I think, and then Lord Solar, I'm sure, and a couple of other characters. So his list was it was also a silly skew, and he acknowledged if he was sort of picking his own list and really sort of going to a, say, GT or an RTT and taking it serious, it probably isn't the list he'd have took. But it was, anything he looked at in my army, as long as he hit it, he generally killed it with his flat 12 damage gun that had 4 shots. For example, he shot Mortarian late in the game. I'll run through it in a little bit more and talk about through the mistakes I made. He shot Mortarian with his 4 shots. Again, no anti-tank in this list. And did 36 wounds to him from one gun. Let's say I didn't even bother rolling his 5 upfield, no pains. I wasn't going to embarrass myself trying to do that. But me and Tim did draw that game, and the reason that we drew it, now this is where I'm going to start talking a bit about the sort of like the way I played and the mistakes I made, because I did make quite a big mistake in that game actually. And I've looked into it since, and there's a bit of ambiguity about this one mistake, because I played it one way, and I think in hindsight, I don't know. I think GW need to maybe clarify something, because I think there's a different rule on their app to the PDF in regards to disembarking out of vehicles. Now, Tim had the app and we checked it on there, and again, maybe the app overrides it. I don't know. So my understanding was in 10th edition, you could disembark from a vehicle within 3. So not wholly within 3, within 3. So you could have the back millimetre of your base within 3 inches. So obviously you get the extra, so it's an inch base, you're actually 4 inches from the front of your base away from the vehicle you got out of, but you're within 3. But obviously wholly within 3 means the far side of the base, side of your base on the far side of the vehicle has to be within 3. So you lose that inch and a bit movement. And a Just Play, they have some kind of weird ruins that like made with foam that are like a couple of inches thick. So it's impossible to disembark wholly within 3, but it would have been fully possible to disembark within 3 and just have the base on the other side. So basically, but the mistake I set a rhino up on my first turn to move by a wall, expecting the rhino to get blown up, but then be able to disembark 2 squads into cover. Now, actually, even with that, I actually think only one of them could have got into cover at best. And also, I did make a mistake that was a bit of a howler. I moved all my Plague Marines into one part of the board, leaving the centre objective kind of open. So I wasn't really able to compete in the centre because I had Morty and a Fleshmower hidden behind an L, but because of the way Fly works and they're kind of slow moving, they were pinned right in the corner to make sure the tanks couldn't get a line of sight on them. They were kind of out of the game unless, when they came out, they had to come out and kind of rely on big charges and stuff like that. I couldn't just react to the centre. I should have disembarked a Plague Marine squad near the centre so I could threaten and kind of, go and sort of put OPSEC bodies on it and not let him get some easy points against me, which he got. Because I did play cards in this, and also it kind of restricted my scoring as well a little bit. And that actually turned out to be something that kind of hampered me throughout the game. I thought I needed to think a little bit more about disembarking the Plague Marines, where the Plague Marines were. Because I ended up we played the quarter deployment, and I put a Rhino each edge on the quarter with the kind of intention of going first actually, to sort of, because I knew he had the big tanks and they're quite open boards, and just hoping I could drive the Rhinos into cover, which I was able to do because I luckily got first, and then I kind of camped on the objectives. I actually disembarked from the Rhino on the second turn and then moved the Rhino to deliberately charge one of the Bane Blades to stop it from moving, to move through so it couldn't poke its gun past the corner of the wall, so Plague Marines could kind of hang out on the objective and make sure I could always hold 2. But like I say, because I couldn't get to the centre as easy, that did kind of come back to haunt me a couple of times in the game. And if I'd have thought about it in advance, I could have just disembarked one Plague Marine squad there, let the other one the Rhino, and then disembarked in cover, and that would have been the smarter play. So the big mistake there was thinking more about where to disembark the Plague Marines and kind of thinking of turning ahead, sort of not just looking at where the assets were at that time, kind of thinking a little bit ahead of myself. So that was one of the big takeaways from that tournament actually. It really sort of, we drew the game because we played on WT's point score, and one player has to be 5 points ahead of the other for it to be classed as a win. Unless it's 5 points, it's a 10-10 draw. And me and Tim because we know each other a bit, we were kind of a bit chatty, and we're having a bit of banter throughout the game as well. We only actually got to turn 4, and we kind of agreed we'd just sort of score it out there. But the reality is, I think at that point, because we were both so heavily skewed, and I got the lucky first turn, I'd been able to just get the points aboard where he couldn't really get to. So I kind of I'd used my sort of rhinos and things to hold him in place, and then kind of threw the carnivores into his vehicles just to sort of keep him busy while I got the points. But at the same time, he could kill anything that he could see. So it was kind of a weird game where he was able to sort of like keep himself honest on the score by just sort of keeping holding the centre, which I wasn't really able to clear. So that was the big mistake from my points. We kind of worked out that neither of us could win the game by more than 5 points. So because we were short on time, it was an inevitable draw basically. But I think possibly if I'd been able to clear the centre, I could have actually took the win in that game. But great game. And the next one is where I'm going to start the conversation about player skill. And at a tournament, when is it okay and what is not okay, and kind of personal opinion on things? Because the next player was a very fluffy guy. Played Imperial Guard again, he had a Baneblade, things like that. And some of the decisions he made, I was quite unsure why he made. And that was a weird mission. So it was one of these ones where actually, I forget what it's called, you lift the objectives up. And on the last turn, the one that's left is worth 15 points. And again, because he had a lot of guns and a lot of tanks, I just had to sort of play for points, play for cards. I could only sort of hold just enough primary. I realised if I cleared one side of the board, because all 3 of the centre objects were open as well, which I wasn't sure I was a big fan of. But Morty being Morty is quite tough. So I realised if I sort of rush carnivores to the left hand side of the board, he kind of deployed quite evenly on his side, so we put this big tank in the middle, one of the Baneblade variants, whichever one it was, the flat 12 damage one again, a couple of Lehman Russes, a couple of tank commanders, and I was able to clear. So I basically set up my carnivores in the middle, were able to jink into a corner. They weren't an objective, but then they jinked again on the second turn into his left hand side and into his deployment. Now, as soon as I was in his deployment, I could kill with the carnivores, are quite reliable, and I set a couple of predators up, or at least one predator to get a line. So between the 2 carnivores and the shooting, I was able to clear the 2 Lehman Russes, so they were tank commands and Lehman Russes. I was able to clear them, so he couldn't, from the centre and right hand side, shoot across the board, which meant Mortarion was kind of angled, just lipping onto the objective, using using an angle to hide himself. So we've been able to get straight on, he could have just seen him. But the way I positioned him, he wasn't, because I cleared that ball. As soon as I hit the deployment zone, he smashed me to pieces with the guns. So I was able to sort of get a jump on him with points. And then, obviously, you lifted the objectives up, and we lifted the first ones on the side he was on. But because I was only able to hold 2, and you still get 5 for your deployment zone. On the last turn, we lifted up the one that was on my side. Whereas in hindsight, I probably should have made the centre lift up. But then if I'd have done that, he might have been more encouraged to deploy on the left, which is what I didn't want him to do, because I knew that was my only way of holding primary, because anything he could see, he'd just smash off the board. Now, where this comes in is he was not moving on to objectives. Like, it was like to the point where he had a Lehman Russ like just next to it, and I wanted to say to him, do you want to take that objective? Is it meant to be on there? But I didn't, and when we scored, I just scored as not being on the objective, sort of being like, well, it was his decision not to put it on there. And at the end, I said, did you mean to put them on there? Was I being a bit harsh? He said, no, and he explained he didn't want to, because he thought if he moved them on the objective, that would make him close to the other carnivore that was hiding and ready to come and pounce. But then he'd have just smashed the carnivore off the board and killed it, and then he could have just held that objective comfortably. And there was a few other mistakes I watched him make. So it's kind of that sort of thing of, at what point is it okay to just let your opponent make like quite big mistakes and not sort of do anything? Like, is that player skill? Is it the fact that I'm not making those mistakes and I'm scoring the points? Is that what a good player does? Or is that, punching puppies? I don't know. This was something where I kind of left that game feeling like I'd won, and I was, from the second to the third, once I cleared the left-hand side, I felt quite confident I was going to win the game, but I kind of felt like I'd won it through just sort of not helping him sort of like with the basics, and I don't know, maybe that's, I don't know, it's a weird one. It's a discussion to be had, you know. I don't know, because normally in practice games, I lose most of my practice games because I'll help my opponent, I'll talk through them, I'll say, this is why you're doing that. Sometimes because they'll explain to me and they'll have thought of something that I haven't seen it from that angle. Actually, oh, that is the right play, I've made the mistake, you're not about to. So it helps me learn. Then at tournaments, I don't point out mistakes, I just let opponents make them. But sometimes it does make me feel a bit like I'm snide, but then I don't know. But then I know that's what most competitive players do. So it just got me thinking. It's an interesting topic of sort of conversation. Anyway, so that was the next one. The next one wasn't really much to talk about in that sense. You know, I think I played most things okay. I think I sort of won just, you know, through player skill in that particular game more than anything. But then the third game was against Necrons. Now, this is where Aiden's video against Necron actually came into handy. And I also had something I wanted to add when I watched Aiden's video. But obviously, that's Aiden's series, that's on mine. So the other thing you can do against Necrons, which is what I did here, you can just move things in front. You could basically, I had a picture on my phone of it. I might see if we can put it in a group somewhere. I literally just ringed off the objectives with rhinos and like vehicles and stuff, so his 20-man warrior squads couldn't get to them. So anyone who knows what Necrons do, they get to the objectives, they stand there, they're hard to kill, and they just beat you on primary while some stuff runs around playing the mission. So I knew that's what he was going to do. I knew that was, I felt like I was a bit up against it, to be honest, in that sense. And the guy was an alright player as well this time. He was quite good. Like, I felt like he knew what he was doing with his army. And there was another mistake there actually I did make, but the way I won this game, and this was, I realised, I just disembarked 10 Plague Marines on an objective that was behind the wall that you couldn't shoot them, and then I just moved a Predator, a Rhino, or might have been a Predator and 2 bloke drones first, and just made a ring around the objective so we couldn't physically get on the objectives without moving through those models. And I made sure that there was 4 inches at least on the either side, and I trusted, because I didn't think he'd kill him with shooting, and I didn't think he could be able to get up with charges, so there was no even way to pile through them. And I managed to keep that wall up. I lost a Rhino and had to move other things up. I managed to get the wall up for 3 turns, which meant I was able to win on the primary, basically, by just holding him off. And the army, you know, that was kind of what I did. Now, the mistake I made in that game, this is a howler of a mistake, and this is where at the start, you know, we asked each other some questions. Now, I didn't ask, can you pick any units up and redeploy them? And I kind of felt like I've been gotcha'd, but at the same time, I've been gotcha'd by myself in this game, because I set up, he was pushing, I don't know what they're called, I'm terrible with the other army's names, so people can, the close combat units the Necrons have, and they kind of hold the scythes in 2 hands. I don't know what they are, so I should probably have found out before I did this podcast. But he had a squad of them basically, and he marched on the no man's land objective nearest to my deployment zone. Again, it was diagonal deployment, this one, the one where it's on the long side to the middle to the opposite quarter. So again, these games is not about me kind of breaking it down. It's more the things I spotted and mainly howler of mistakes. I mean, I didn't ask him if he had the orb where you can pick a unit up. Now, I literally set up, I thought I was playing this well. I thought I had 2 carnivores, one was going to charge from one side, one was going to go from the other. And I was even thinking maybe I should try and put like a chaff unit into another point, so he'll never have more than 2 of these models fighting into any of them, so he can't pile in. And I even set up a Predator as well. I was thinking I might try and do a couple of nervous shots, because I've got flat 3 damage, I think they've got 3 wounds. Then I was worried I might screw one of my charges up, and then they'll pile all into one carnivore and I'll lose it unexpectedly. So I was unsure anyway. So I set it all up. At the end of my movement phase, he just picked them up and redeployed them into my deployment zone, which was a bit of an issue for me. I think weirdly it might have been a mistake on his part, because then he just gave me that quarter of the board and just moved everything around where I had the ring of vehicles around that objective. He did have a 9-inch charge of Plague Marines behind the wall, which he failed with the reroll, so that was big for me. Because at that point then he invested too much into trying to clear that objective, whereas if the one I was trying to kill there, if he'd have let me take that unit and then maybe if he'd been able to get something else over, I wasn't really able to compete on that objective as hard. If he'd been able to get something else there with a lot of OC, which Necrons aren't short of. So I did wonder if it was a mistake there. But at the time, so anyway, the point is, ask your opponent more questions at the start of the game, because I didn't ask that question. But the difference with this tournament was, so I actually finished second, because obviously I drew 1-1-2, which put me in second place. Now, one of the things that made this tournament different from the other one, on the way down, or when we got there, I asked about what the missions were, and I spent time reading them, and I thought in advance of the games how I was going to sort of play them, and in each game I had a bit of a game plan as to what I was going to do, because my army, it is a bit brain dead in some sense. It kind of rushes at you and just, you know, smashes things. It's kind of about tempo in the game. In most games I'm close to being tabled, but at the expense of, you know, holding my opponent off their primary, or, you know, scoring points, etc. So that's kind of how the army sort of worked out in that sense, and it did work quite well. I'll be honest, it was quite good. It was fun to play as well, just sort of rushing at things, and, you know, carnivores go smash. I'm so high on carnivores right now. I honestly can't. I'd say to anyone, test them. You know, put one in your list and test it and see what you think. Anyone who's interested in Death Guard, they were so good, especially with contagions. Even going into like big toughness 12 things, or even the Bane Blades at toughness 13. Obviously you get another unit, put them in contagion, you still get the extra AP, so you're generally going into stuff hitting on 2s, wounding on 2s or 3s with AP 4 with the contagion. They were just, and with damage 2 plus D6 and then 8 OC, so even if you didn't kill things, you generally would sort of like hold a point. Deathwing Knights and stuff, yeah, pull them down, don't get me wrong, like they're not, you know, indestructible, but a lot of like infantry combat units struggle to get through them as well, just with them winning on 5s and things, and most things having AP2, so you still get a 5-up save. So they were really good. You know, I honestly, and the 14-inch movements and rapid ingress in them was something that I learned as well. So I'll talk about the second time where I picked that up. So I've got some notes just that I made from those games. I'm just going to sort of make sure that I've sort of covered the things that I wanted to talk about from that one. I mean, the main thing was things that just not get distracted with killing as well, because that was some of the things my opponents did. They just got so fixated on having to kill Mortarion, or having to, you know, sort of that carnivore's got to die. And it was like, well, that carnivore has to die if you want to take that objective. There's a couple of times I was thinking, but if you just leave that carnivore and you move the assets to the other objective, that carnivore will take that objective, then I can't go and take the other one. You kind of, by keeping things around, because often I had 2 carnivores or sometimes even 3 carnivores together, kind of helping me by trying to kill the one you can see, because you're the 2, and then you're kind of getting in range of the 2. So that was, you know, something to sort of mention. You know, don't get focused on killing, look at the score. And in all games I kept track of the score, and I've got a really useful sheet that I got when I filled in a team tournament for one of the local teams, where at the bottom you can keep track of the cards that have been drawn. So I was even keeping track of the cards that had been drawn and trying to think what was possible for them to come up with next, to sort of think about where I could put my units. And then, you know, even thinking on the cards I was playing, putting Nurglings. Sometimes the Nurglings would go on deep strike and they just had nowhere to go in really of meaning. So I'd be like, well, I'll put them there. Then next turn, if I'm drawing gears, didn't have it right at that moment, then they can move into there. And then if they want to kill the Nurglings, they can kill the Nurglings. You know, the frustrating thing is that's, you know, what happens. But yes, that's. Sorry if I'm rambling a bit. It's a bit weird, as I say, talking into the computer as a as a solo person. So. And also, yeah, so some of the other plays that I did that were good to highlight was behind enemy lines. He'd screen behind in one of the games, I think it was the second guard player, he'd screened his backfield quite well actually. And the only way for me to get behind enemy lines I worked out was for me to charge 3 Nurglings into a Lehman Russ, which the carnivore was also going to charge. But then the Nurglings afterwards, there was a second Lehman Russ, or a second unit within 3 of the Lehman Russ, so I charged aside to finish. The carnivore killed the tank, and then the Nurglings piled in 3 into the unit that was within 3, so it can move to another combat, and that extra 3-inch move put them fully in his deployment zone for me to score that card. So that was something that I wanted to sort of highlight as well, of trying to sort of look for jank, you know, like trying to sort of get the movement out the combat phase, because it is still there a little bit. It's just harder to sort of crack. Because I thought that's something to sort of mention, because perhaps we Death Guard people aren't talking about the combat tricks as much these days, but it is still there. And sorry, I'm just reading notes, so I'm going. It's because I'm just looking to make sure that I've looked at things. And the other thing was also the tempo games as well, not just jam everything down people's throats. Because I actually played a game against Custodes as a practice game before I went to these 2 GTs. I think it might have been after I'd recorded the podcast talk about the list, and it went horribly. And after the game, I thought about it, and I thought about the way I played, and I just played it totally wrong. I actually played the same mission yesterday against Eldar and made some of the similar mistakes, so I'll talk about that shortly. But yeah, basically just tempo in the game. Like, he was much slower than me. Like, if he could get to the objectives with the Custodes, he did have the obsec, but he couldn't get there. And I also have obsec with the carnivores, you know, that are quick, and I can just stand Plague Marines on it. But I kind of rushed up thinking, I'm going to, you know, flat 3 damage predators, I'm going to clear the middle and then smash him in my carnivores. But he fought first and just smashed my carnivores, and, you know, near enough tabled me. I scored points, but I didn't score enough to even be close to the win. So that was something to be sort of, you know, out of this kind of list, this threat rush list. It wants to run at people and it wants to smash people. That's kind of what the list is built to do, you know, in combat, just punching stuff. But sometimes that's not the way to play. Sometimes there is still a little bit of thought, and I don't know if there's nuance can go into a list like this, because it's very much just a sort of like a rough and tumble kind of list. But you know, that was something to highlight as well as a mistake I'd made. So I'll talk a little bit about the next GT. Now, the next GT was actually the Clumsy Orc one, similar one to where me and Aidan played at in one of the previous episodes. It's actually the same TOs that where I went 1 and 2 and sparked this series. And the first game, I'm going to have to recall what I played in the first game now, actually. I played Dark Angels. Now, the Dark Angels player game, it was similar to the Guard player played at the second event. He was newer to the hobby. Lovely guy, absolutely lovely guy, but he was making fundamental errors where I wanted to sort of like help him out and say, like, I've got 5 OC here, you've got 5 OC in your squad, but why have you only put 2 on the objective? Because I only have to put 3 on now, and then I take it, so you're not going to hold the primary in your turn. Whereas if you put all 5 of the guys on, I had to put 5 of my guys on, and then actually kill one of your guys to take it, or charge them, and you've got a character embedded in the squad who'll probably pick up all 5 of my guys. But he didn't do that. He was more worried about getting into cover and sort of like having, you know, he could only fit 2 guys in the way the cover was. And I was like, well, my Plague means just throw them away. So I'll 5, there you go. You're getting no primary. Plague means gone. Who cares? Like, they're 80 points. They're in my list just to stand there and die. So that was one of the things. But then again, it comes back to, is that play skill? Is it play skill that I could see that and he couldn't? Because I've certainly made these kind of mistakes in the past. Like, my second ever tournament, I mean, we talk about Mike Porter a lot on this podcast. It's not like we've got some kind of love affair with him or anything like that, but he's one of the good players in our area. Same with Matt Robinson and things like that. So if ever you want to really talk about something at the top of the game, you know, he's a known name as well. I suppose it's good to name. But my second ever tournament, I played Mike Porter, not really having a clue about what was going on. And I didn't even understand about, you know, combat tricks, piling in and all this stuff. And he basically was playing Jim Vessel's list, or a rip-off version. I could say a rip-off version, a version that he tweaked to make fit his own play style, where it was like the Plague Bearer War with Smite characters from Thousand Suns standing behind it. And he beat me by, I think, more than 100 points, because it was in England in 8th edition. This is when I was just getting into competitive stuff at the Ward at the end of 8th. We used to play, I don't know what it was actually called, but we used to mix the cards with one of the rule book missions. So you play 2 GW missions smashed together. So you could score, especially in the cards, and the points weren't capped. So you in theory, you could just keep scoring as many points as the cards and the other mission would allow you. I think there was like, is it Pillars of Power, where you could score like 15 points, I think, per turn if you had them all powered on. And there was, you could get, like, I mean, I think he put like 100 and something points past me. It was like to the point where when he won the event, the TO sort of made a joke about how he beat up a small child in his first round, and I was that small child basically, because I had made so many mistakes that at the time I didn't even realise were mistakes, but now looking back I see them, and it was kind of interesting watching other players make those same mistakes, which is why even though I went undefeated, I'm not, bragging about it and saying, this list is amazing and I'm an amazing player, because the reality is I got those wins because my opponent didn't help themselves the way that, like maybe it's a larger event or one that's maybe more sort of like competitive focused, or like, GT, where you might expect people to travel. There's like just a naturally higher caliber of player. Which again, a higher caliber player it's just experience 9 out of 10 times. Higher caliber isn't generally someone smarter than the other person. It's just they've played more games, or they've played the hobby for longer. But that was just got me interested. The first game against Arcanes was a similar thing to that one there. So I don't want to sort of like go into great detail. In terms of mistakes that I made, I don't know if I really made any howlers in that one. I think again, like it was kind of one of those ones, the way it played out, it was just sort of in my favour, I guess, from that one. Now the second game that I played at that event, if we jump into this, was against Guard again. I seem to just play Guard endlessly. He didn't have. It was more of a competitive Guard list, actually. I think it was more what you would probably see at like a GT level, outside of the outer line of sight spam lists that I know are very prevalent within Guard. He had 2 big squads of Bulgrim, which were just going to sort of move up the board and bully me and sort of hold the primary. And then it was just, I think, a Lehman Russ Demolisher, maybe 2 of those. The ones with the big, short range, but like big gun on the top. 2 tank commanders, a Wyvern or a Manticore. He had a couple of, I think it might have been a man. He had an outer line of sight gun anyway that was quite good. So this one was a bit more. He'd come up from America, a lovely guy as well. I wish I could remember his name. If I open up BCP now, probably sorry, not BCP. He's Best Coast Parent, so I'm getting confused with BCP and Battlescribe. If I open up now, I'll probably crash and I'll just get distracted on the cover. He was a lovely guy, absolute top fella. And the mission we were on, he rushed my deployment zone with a Bulgrin, and I think he maybe played a bit aggressive with his tanks more than he needed to. But I just turtled up. I realised how the game was going to go. And I realised I just have to turtle up. It was the one where in the middle it splits into 2 different objectives. So I sort of turtled up and just sort of, ready to run on the objectives when I need to score them. Otherwise, I'm just going to hold the one in my deployment zone and the nearest one to me to get 10 points on primary. And then, at the end of the game, you got an extra 5 points if you moved onto the objectives. Now, I felt in this one, if I went second, and like I said, I just turtled up and on the last turn ran onto all the objectives, and that might be the difference, because I felt it was probably going to be a pretty even game in terms of score, because I thought his army was just going to do the same. So he's just going to turtle up and just line his guns down the middle of the board and just wait to smash me. Like, you come out, you're dead. And I think he was smart enough to realise that, to be honest. So I think he realised if he just pushed at me, which kind of also was what I wanted him to do, because he pushed and let me. For the second turn onwards, I was able to charge carnivores into tanks because he used a 14-inch move. I actually outflanked 2 of them because I couldn't deploy them, and moved them in, rapid ingress them in so only 1 tank could shoot them, hoped that they'd live through the tank, and then the following turn I'd just come and smash the tank, basically 14-inch, and then sort of, a short charge. And that worked quite well. So in the last turn of the game, because he pushed into me, I was able to. Basically, I was playing for the win. We'd worked it out. We worked out the bottom of my turn 5 what I had to do, and basically I needed to take 1 more objective than I need to hold him to 5 at the end on the standing objectives, because you even score the one in your deployment zone. But I'd said at Morty had the previous turn again had killed the tank and then just gone into his deployment zone and done teleport homers and deploy behind enemy lines. So when Morty's doing teleport homers for you, it was a weird game basically. So the last term Morty's pushing his home field objective, trying to clear a squad of guardsmen, and then put his own 6 OC on it, and that would have got me 15 points and him 5 points on the primary, and then I would have won the game by 5 points. Instead, it would have been a tie if I couldn't do that. A 96-96, I think it would have been. And I actually cleared the guards and thought we'd done it, and then right at the end, he remembered he had another character that we both forgot about behind the wall, had the extra OC he needed, because he still had Lord Solar and one of his tanks on there, which I think Lord Solar had 2 OC, the tank had 3 OC, it was the outliner side, I think it was a Basilisk, and then this extra character was the 1 OC he needed, it's the tie Morty, so that was the 5 points I couldn't get, so... But it was a really fun way to end the game, and it was one of those legit things. I couldn't have done anything about the character, even if I knew about it, we both remembered or not. So we both thought it was, a really good game. That was really good fun. But I think the biggest thing in that was just sort of thinking about rapid ingress and thinking, about line of sight, and trying not to make the mistake of just rushing into the middle, which is what I probably would have done had I not played that practice game in Custos, to be honest. Just rushed in the middle, going, first turn I just got to live, and then second turn I smash you. But I think reality, first turn everything dies. Maybe Morty limps in with like 1 wound and collapses on a Lehman Russ. Maybe he kills it, maybe he doesn't, and then he just gets killed, and then I've just got nothing to score points with or sort of push again in the middle. So that was something I'd learned from that experience playing against Custodes, about sort of tempoing the game a little bit more and trying not to just be sort of like, well, my army's a hammer and it runs at people, so that's what I'm going to do, and blah, 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 wah. Sort of in the style of Orcs. And then the last game, moving on there, was against Tyranids. Now, this was an interesting game. I never played against new Tyranids, but I did actually make a mistake here that definitely sort of something to sort of highlight there. But I also did something that... I should do this in every game, and everyone should do this in every game, and this is something to remind people to do. It's not like, I'm a genius for doing it, because this is basic competitive Warhammer, to be honest with you, and that is pre-measuring and putting dice down. So I spoke to him, and it was mainly big bugs that he took. I don't know what they're called again. I should do this before I go on the price. It's the big bug that has the big gun on its back. Price 36. Lots of strength 9, flat 3 damage shot to AP3. I don't know what it is. If people really worry about it, someone comments below, I'll try and find out, and then I'll reply to the comments. But basically, they have a 36-inch range and they move 8 inches. So we worked out that the range on the las cannons and my Predator autocannons had 2 more inches from them. So I deployed at the back of the board, and it was the long ways deployment, and just made sure, even if he moved, he couldn't shoot me back. So my fragile little Predators, I did not want to take his shooting, he couldn't get in range of. And again, this is where the Predators get a bit whiffy. So the Predators in the first round of shooting were absolute beasts. Like, this game was a game of mental dice. They were absolute beasts. They looked at somewhere, they shot it. Even the auto cannons were connecting with their 5s to wound on his toughness 10, and his toughness 10 models with strength 9. And he was failing saves left, right, and centre. And I think I picked up definitely a full one, left one on 2 wounds, and another one on 6 wounds of these 3 big shooty bugs he had. And it was and he was terrified at this point of Predator. So he then moved just so he could get small line of sight on stuff, and just gave up on trying to go for my big targets. He was so scared of these Predators. In the remaining of the game, the Predators went the other way and could only roll 1s and 2s to hit and wound for three solid turns, to the point where we were joking about you're re-rolling 1s into 1s. We were just joking about how the Predators had we've talked about another podcast today as well. They had anxiety. They'd I don't know. They just performance anxiety. They believed they could do it, and then they got anxiety about them. I don't know, being able to do it. They were very embarrassing. I'll put it that way. But that game was a weird one. Now, I don't think this mission should be at tournaments, to be honest. And this is one criticism I have of this event. But it is also an event they're trying to encourage casual play and people do things a bit different. It's a mission where you get points for putting characters on objectives. Now, I only had Morty, so obviously I'm a bit hampered, but Morty's a big tough boy, as we all know. So I couldn't just move Morty. I couldn't deploy him out in the open because the bugs he had would probably go through him or hurt him. He did have enough to shoot him. But then, luckily, I went first and, moved my Predators. I'd been smart with how I deployed them all. We'd measured, I'd put dice to where he could go, and I knew if I put my Predators behind that dice within range, he couldn't shoot me back, blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of how I'd played that one. Now, at this point also, this is another mistake I'd made in the past. I just put things on middle objectives on my first turn. But this one, they were all pretty open. And I knew if I did that, I was probably just going to lose stuff. So I thought, well, what I'll do is, I'm happy to take, because you only get 3 points for this one. I'll just take the 3 points of my home one. But I'm set up, so anything he puts on objectives, I can either out or see him with the carnivores rushing on from behind the wall, or just plague me, he's jumping out around, or just to die. And I'll try and bait his characters out, because I didn't have any characters, so I thought I'll give up the middle, and I'll let him have the middle, and then I'll try and clear it or hold him to nothing, but take his characters in the point, and that way I can be up on the trades, and then Morty can come on the middle, and I can hopefully sort of get a jump on the primary. Which is how that was the tactic going in. And it did actually work out quite well. At one point, I could see his big bugs were going to come for the centre. So, because they were bigger, they couldn't move through the wall. I even put Morty to kind of bait him. So, the only way he could get in the centre objective was to charge Morty to get within an inch. And Morty, I think at this point, was only on 8 wounds. But he might have died. But he wasn't sure if he wanted to do that. And, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. We kind of thought maybe maybe Morty would go. But like I say, it was a game of mental dice on both sides. Like, it was a game where something would have 6 dice to roll, and it would be like you'd roll 6 dice and get 5 6s, or then you'd roll 6 dice and get 5 1s. We were both like, it was the most insane game of dice on both sides. Like, I had some mental rolls, he had some mental rolls, I had some huge whiffs, he had some huge whiffs. So we were just kind of laughing about it come the end. But that was my battle tactic. Now, the mistake I made in this, and I made this mistake a lot, and I'm sure a lot of other people do as well, is not screening my backfield, especially against Tyranids where you can fire a Spore Mine into the corner. Now, I knew I'd screened it for big bases, but I didn't check, and I forgot about the Spore Mines. I could have just moved, and I could have measured and said, I've, verbalised, are you happy I've screened this to sort of make it so it's not even and I didn't. And he shot Spore Mines at me, and I think I even did it twice. So this was the thing where it let him get into the game and score his cards, where otherwise I'd have been able to run away with it. And he actually sort of kept it quite a close game for periods, because he was able to get his cards where I wasn't able to get cards as easily, because I was sort of hesitant to go in the middle. I was trying to make him commit to the middle, then I was going to try and clear the middle and then push up the board once I felt he didn't have any threats. Because my army is the Carnivores, Mortarion, the 3 Predators. Most Death Guard armies struggle into armour, and as much as big guns armour scares me because it's generally the things with the big guns, I can kill armour quite comfortably with the Carnivores, Mortarion and the Predators. I'm not as scared of it as other Death Guard lists are. So I kind of wanted his armour to come, and I was thinking, I'll charge with Carnivores, I'll charge with Morty, I'll put las cannons into the stuff that I really need to kill to soften it, and make sure those things actually sort of connect. But he kind of was hesitant at the centre. I don't know if he'd realised that's what I was trying to do. But anyway, but eventually did commit some characters. I was able to clear them, and my game plan did unfold that kind of how I intended it to, and I was able to get a win. Now, we talked out of the last turn because, we were laughing and joking about the crazy dice for a little bit too long, and we sort of, we were like 2 minutes left on the clock at the start of his turn. So I was like, right, you just tell me, you draw your cards, I'll tell you if I think you could definitely not score it, and we'll only roll what matters. He drew 2 cards that were like 10 points. I was like, look, mate, you could, you couldn't, but you probably can, so you can have 10 points. And then the last turn, I was like, you can probably just take the centre if you want. And, I had a lot of stuff left, but, max points, I'll give you, which was 12 points on the primary and the 10 on the card. So it was like a 22-point thing, but that, I still won by, I think, 5 or 6 points, so it didn't matter. At that point, I built up a lead after he'd sort of committed to the centre, and I'd been able to clear it, and my game plan, as I say, coming to fruition. So it was a close finish. But from the third turn onwards, it wasn't that close. The first two were very close, and then the third turn's when I had my big push, and then the fifth one, it kind of was a bit of a done deal. So again, that was my big mistake of not screening my deployment zone, because that made the first two turns a bit of a bum squeaker. Because like I say, especially because his dice were going nuts as well at me, and I was losing things I hadn't expected to lose, and vice versa. I did lose Morty, and obviously in that mission, once I'd lost my character scoring and he still had a Hive Tyrant left, like I say, it was a bit of a squeaky bum time where I was like, if he just stands at Hive Tyrant, then I'm not able to kill it, he's going to run away with the primary. But like I say, I killed the other characters that had come to centre first, and I was able to sort of like manage a Hive Tyrant and sort of like use walls and things to stop it from getting the centre. So anyway, I don't know if that's anything useful. I don't know if I've just rambled into a microphone for 50 minutes. I'm not quite sure on that one, to be fair. But I'll come to some closing statements. So I do have one more RTT before I maybe sort of look at a complete different list. Now I want to try fixed. Now the things that I've took away from these games is, and I feel like the comments are going to erupt with sort of anger, flesh mowers and bloat drones. Maybe it's just because I've got such a heavy skew, I am really not feeling them. Like in every game I played, they may well not been on the board. They were just naff. They don't kill armor. They're not strong enough to do it. They don't have enough dice to reliably kill infantry, and their OC's poor. Their movement's poor. Their only toughness 9, and I just found them all around just poor. I know they're only 100 points, and I think in a mono Death Guard build, if you're using it to spread contagions, because obviously I'm not really spreading the contagions as much, I don't need them as much as their armies do. They should have been. They could be anything else, I think, in this list. The Beast of Nurgle is quite good. The Beast of Nurgle is a funny unit. There's games where he's never an MVP, but he just lives because I've got so much armor. The weapons you have to invest to reliably kill him. If you're like killing him, it's expensive, like leaving a carnivore, or maybe leaving a carnivore alive on 2 wounds or something. And 2 wounds is sometimes all it needs to come and like wreck your squad, or have enough OC to move on to a point or something. So the Beast was good, but he could also just be a squad of Nurglings, or maybe just not there at all. Because I've got 2 Nurglings. I've got the Beast and another squad of Nerds to be a deep strike threat, so people have to scream me. And the Beast could just be a squad of Nurglings, I think. I'm 50-50 on him. But the 2 flesh mowers, they just don't have any place in this list, in my opinion. They actually fit the skew quite well, but they don't. Every game I was sort of like left points where I was like, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know when I was deploying them. I was like, I don't know what they're going to go and kill. I don't know. I mean, maybe if I'd have played like armies with more marine type bodies, maybe it's like, for example, I was thinking they'd probably be great in the World Eaters, because I can, I've got to accept I'm going to take a punch and then play layers. So maybe I put them forward to take the first punch of the carnivores coming, or I lose a carnivore and then they rush up and clear the berserkers or whatever that kill the carnivore, because that is the profile that they're there to kill. But I felt more that I would maybe just rather have more plague means. I'd really quite like Typhus, to be honest, but then that's 2 characters, and again that's kind of working against my skew, because if he comes in on his own, he's a bit of a he's an easy assassinate, and it kind of gives those mid-profile weapons, auto cannons and heavy bolters and stuff. It gives them a bit more of a target, whereas at the moment, most things wound me on 5s unless it's dedicated anti-tank, and then it's have you brought enough to deal with the skew. So that was the thinking. Now the thinking is I want to try fixed. So I took tactical on all these, and the list plays tactical. As I say, it's not a list that scores 100 points, because the list, surprisingly, when I've played it without just rushing it, is a bit more of a denial list, because I've got loads of OBSEC, and the plague means they don't even try and kill. So if they jump on a point, they stand there, it's 10 OC, they maybe fire a couple of plasma gun shots, or whatever, try and just like plink. Say they've got 10 OC, just plink us there on 9. That's denied them the primary. I know I'm going to lose the Plague Marines. Sometimes the Carnivores did the same. A couple of times in the Deathwing, the Deathwing game, and obviously it's not Deathwing, Dark Angels game, where I was a bit worried that Charging Cavalry might actually get pulled down, because they do slap in combat, the Terminators. So I just moved them on points and just stood there, and I was like, well, I know he's going to die next turn. I'm 99.9% certain he's going to die, but you're going to get no primary, and I'm getting at least 10. So I was generally tabled or close to being tabled at the end of the games, even the ones where I'd run away on the scoreboard, because the list, it's durable, but it's not, doesn't live through everything. So I was sort of low scoring games a lot of the time. Now I think the change, I've gone through lots of iterations with changes, looking at Land Raiders, and I think Land Raiders are good. Sam Boardman on the podcast me and Aidan did, where we each interviewed one of the other 4 Form 1 LGT players, really sold me on Land Raiders. Now the event I'm going to this coming weekend is playing LGT, the London Grand Tournament style terrain. There's a big caveat here, and this is why I think I'm going to err on the side of caution. LGT on their website still have their old terrain maps, which do not fit Land Raiders even to deploy outside of the terrain on 2 or 3 of the deployments, and there's no line to move them through. So I'm worried that the gaming centre in Leeds, Leodis, are going to just say, will you play them off the website, and then I'm not going to have room for the Land Raider. Because what I'm thinking about doing is, I'm pretty much sold on this at this point, is dropping the 2 flesh mowers, taking another 2 5-mans of Plague Marines, and then halving, turning the Beast of Nurgle into a squad of Nurglings. So I've still got 2 deep strike threats to the Nurglings, and then using that to get a 3rd Rhino. I was originally thinking maybe there was a couple of I could drop a Predator as well, not take the Rhino, and I think drop the Beast altogether, not replace it with Nurglings, and that would put a Land Raider in. And I did try that actually I played Eldar with it, and the Land Raider was okay, but because I'm using it to put Templars in as a bit of a launching point to get its guns in line of sight, sometimes I'm moving where I didn't necessarily want the launching point for the Plague Marines. So I was a bit unsure, plus especially if I end up with like a movement issue, I'm going to really regret it. But then, the other last cannon shots would be good. So I think for this one, I'm going to just go with a 3rd Rhino, 2 more Plague Marines. I'm going to play fixed. Now, I'm not going to go into a great deal about how I'm going to play fixed and things like that, because Sam and the gentleman from Ireland, the Aidan interview, Pierce, they give great runs on how they're going to do that. But the idea is you don't need to push past the mid-board, you need to push past the centre, which I think really benefits Deska. Now I've got the Carnivore, so I can get the centre really quickly. So if people come to the centre, I can generally smash them off as well. And because I've got long range shoot for my 3 Predators, that benefits me possibly even more than it benefits them. Like those 2 particular lists that we interviewed the guys, and obviously the 6 squads of Plague Marines, 5-man. Again, the way I play them, I'm happy to throw them away. If they do damage, sometimes they do. I've been impressed with them when they have gone into combat as well. Sometimes they've helped finish off the last 3 or 4 wounds on something with the auto hitting wounds on 6s. So they're not bad, they're a good unit, and I've been sold on them. But I think I want the Rhino just to sort of like do that. And then the Rhino in itself can go up into the action. So I think I'm going to try and do teleport homers and cleanse. And I think I've got ways. So the problem is on the UKTC, so you generally, to do cleanse, you have to have a unit, because it's going to die. It's going to go stand in the middle, which is completely open. It's going to die. So I think you've got to have 5 cleanse units. And I'm thinking in the later turns, it might end up being a Rhino. Now, I'll probably talk through those games after I've played them, because in my head, I've got some ideas of how it's going to look on the table and how it's going to unfold. But like in the game against Eldar, I tried it last night, and it was a skew Eldar list. It didn't have the in-kind of there, but Fate dice are still stupid. They still had those silly War Walkers that -1 damage and stuff. Although Morty ignores them if you shoot the Predators from his aura. I played it wrong. I did try and push to the objective in his half of the board with Morty, thinking I might draw some fire, but I should have just used cover better. And yeah, I made some mistakes in how I played that game. I tried to overextend. The lists had the Land Raider in because I wanted to test it. The list is designed not to push past the centre, but I still pushed past the centre and tried to get in this deployment zone with half my army, which, is again why this podcast is sort of there, like, because I do stupid mistakes all the time, but I try and make those stupid mistakes in practice games. So when it comes to GTs and RTTs and events, the mistakes have been made, and I try and learn from them, and try and sort of do it that way. So that was something that's the next iteration I'm going to try. I'm going to try fixing again. I can do bring it down. I can do assassinate. Assassinate's probably pretty hard on my list because Sam on the other podcast talked about how we can use Plague Burst crawlers to do that. So it's kind of like, well, if you want to push the characters towards the middle, brilliant. I've got things that can, punch units and, take characters in combat. If he doesn't and he hides them at the back, he doesn't even attach the units, fantastic. I'll just shoot Plague Burst crawlers into unattached characters that aren't lone ops, because a lot of armies are doing that, and so on and so on and so on. A lot of armies are spamming characters is what I mean by that. And a lot of Death Guard armies obviously are taking the 3 PPC, so that is a good option for them. But I'm, deliberately running things a little bit different. Plus, I prefer this type of list. I have to say I was much happier playing this list than I was ever playing Plague Burst crawlers and Morty. I know people like it, and I think I'm going to try it. I might end up, when I'm sort of at the point where I think I'm going to go to GT and feel at least like I'm going to go have a good shot at 3-2. Maybe it'll be more EN3 Plague Burst crawlers, because I'm definitely seeing the merit, especially in armies like Eldar and Grey Knights and run around the board and make so you can't interact. I definitely see the merit of it. But this has been really fun. Just everything's really quick in this list, and everything's got 10 or 14 move with the Carnivore. Plague means jumping out of rhinos really quick, and there's everything has a punch to it. Even the Predators, as fragile as they are, I mean, the Predators are so swingy, as I say. Like, sometimes they just roll threes upwards, for fun, because that's normally what they're wounding on or hitting on. Other times, they just roll 1s and 2s, C's of. But they're good in the list, Normally, I found every game, I've never lost all 3 in a game, and usually they're generally all sat in firing lanes. But the way the skew works is 3 Carnivores are running at you with Morty on one side, and then you've got Rhinos, maybe he's rushing up to do the boards, in those missions to do engaging all fronts or something like that, or trying to sort of and this one is probably maybe going to be to teleport homers or against the Necron game with screening objective. So you have to shoot these things if you want to play your game, but if you're shooting the Carnivores, Predators are going to keep shooting at you because it's one or the other. Shoot the Predators, yeah, fair play, not getting shot, you're quite safe, where you are until the Carnivores get there and they're a turn away from you now. So it works well in that sense, but it's such a heavy skew. Admittedly, I see loads of people slagging off Predators and saying they're not great. Without 3 Carnivores also being in the list, yeah, I would probably agree they're not great. 3 Fleshmore Bloat Drones do not work with 3 Predators, because the Bloat Drones, they're not damage dealers. I think maybe I'm playing them wrong. Maybe you put the Spitters on, maybe you sort of charge stuff, you fall back and charge again to sort of get things at the board, put things on contagion. If you're playing cards, it gets you engage points, some clever little plays there, which I think is what Aiden and the other guys running them and loving them to death are doing. But I'm going to run at you and I want them to smash into you, and I want them to kill them with the flesh mower. They just don't have a damage output that's meaningful to me, if I'm to be totally honest. They have the same profile that Plague Marines kill, so if I'm worried about those kind of stuff, the Plague Marines can go and deal with those targets quite handily. The other thing I might change in the list as well, actually, before I kind of wrap this episode up, I might also take the Blight Launchers. Now again, this is something, as I said, this isn't like a sort of genius level podcast, this is me sort of talking about trying to get better, mistakes I've made, things I've maybe done right, reminding other people of the basics, like I said, pre-measuring, putting dice down. So this is kind of like obviously the idea of it. But one of the things I'm noticing other people doing is putting Blight Launch in Plague Marines. Now to me, I think the Spitters are too good not to take, the anti-infantry 2+, -1 to hit ignores cover. Maybe that's because I don't have bloat drones with them or Plague Burst crawlers with them, and I can put them in a Rhino, 2 of them shoot out the firing deck, so it is a pseudo bloat drone. I know I can't Overwatch with them. That was pointed out in the last video. Again, thank you very much for the person who commented that. Again, this is one of the mistakes I would have made at an event had someone not left that comment, and exactly why I say I'd gone to the event and someone, I'd set an Overwatch up and someone had told me, you can't Overwatch after I'd set it up, and I go, oh, well, I can't do a tape back now, so I've lost that vehicle for nothing. This is exactly the kind of mistake. So thank you very much to the person who made that comment, because I did think you could Overwatch with the firing deck. You can't. Which you can still push forward and have the flames. Flame. I always call them flames. I know they're not. I know they're Plague Spitters. But yeah, so maybe that's there. But I see everyone taking Blight Launches on Plague Marines, and I guess that's because it's synergised well with the plasma guns. Because if there's 2 plasma guns in the squads, so it's kind of like same range, similar profile, that you can kind of, so maybe it's, you can just hose down one target. I'm not sure. So I might, in the next this RTT, I might just put them in just to see how I feel on all 6 squads with them, just to sort of have the comparison. Because I'm going to force myself to play fixed, I don't know if it's going to be a mistake, because there might be games, because I can still play a tactical with the list. I don't think I'm making any changes that stop tactical from working. If anything, it might even play tactical better. But I'm going to play fixed just to try it, get that sort of, that comparison to playing tactical, and then maybe that'll help me sort of come up with, the games where to take fixed and where to take tactical, because I think Death Guard, high level play, there's probably games where you switch between the two. That's what I suspect, at least, and that's something I'd like to move towards. So I'm going to try and Plague Marines with the Blight Launchers as well, just to try them, and that way at least I've got information as to the split or not. The other thing I also was considering, because there's a couple of times that the Plague Marines would get charged and live. Now, I'm not sure I'm going to do this. I might try a couple of squads. I might just do it on order for the curiosity. It's putting plasma guns on the champion in the Plague Marine squad. Now, the reason that is, if you can shoot, you can do an action. Same way, if you can advance, or assault weapons, if you can advance and shoot, you can advance and do an action. So, there's a couple of times the Plague Marines would get charged by something. Maybe to wrap them up, maybe to stop them doing an action, maybe for people to steal movement and try and get close if they're following turn, if they had like a fall back and shoot or fall back and something mechanic. And that locked the Plague Marines up from doing an action where I needed them to maybe do one. Because my Plague Marines so often are not just get out the Rhino, stand there and die, I am wondering if this particular list would benefit from putting plasma guns on the Plague Marine champion. That way, I can always, especially if I'm going to go fixed, I can always do cleanse and I can always do teleport homers, provided I've got a guy on the objective and I hold it. But then at the same time, the other side of that argument is, well, if I've got a guy on the objective and he's in combat, he can always fall back and put the OC, and then if there's another unit going to come on, because obviously I'm in combat, I might not have the OC on it and I might have to fall back anyway, to not get killed on if there's another round of combat coming. So maybe, there's another unit going to come on anyway. That unit that would be the unit that would come on and do the action, maybe that one is the one that holds it. I don't know. I don't know if that made any sense or not. I can expand on that last bit if someone puts in the comment it doesn't make sense, as to how you sort of have one unit doing an action and the one holding an objective sometimes. Maybe the guy with the plasma gun would be falling back anyway because he becomes part of the unit holding the objective, and it's the other unit that come on and actually do the action, because you probably don't want to stay in combat and risk having that fight back, because then the fight back, you might lose your OC and actually not be able to hold the point anymore. So that person might get primary that you were trying to deny from the following turn. So like I say, my Plague Marines do not fight. My Plague Marines go and stand and die for Nurgle. That's what they do. They're just 10 OC bodies with a bit of plink damage, unless I have to have a push turn where I need them to push, or like I say, someone's pushed into me and I realise I've got to do something, or maybe I've got to do a bit of move blocking. Like in the guard games, I realised if I just move block tanks and held them in place, that was something I could do. So again, I feel that's probably the end of this particular episode. I mean, I've got some other lists that I'd like to talk about, some other ideas, some things that I've been sort of cooking up. I want to try biologist putrefiers, because I know the internet's sort of lit up with them about how they make Plague Marines hammers, whereas like I say, my Plague Marines are not hammers. They kill certain things very well, but anything that's dedicated anti-combat, them hitting on 4s, sometimes they just don't roll enough dice to be reliable. For example, I would not charge 5 Plague Marines into 5 Khorne Berserkers. Not a chance. I would not go even consider that if I was taking the point off them. I would literally stand them in front of them, try and kill 1/5 Khorne Berserker. They don't get any primary, and then accept the Plague Marines die. That's how I would do that particular instance. But obviously, maybe if you had a foul Blight Spawn and the biologist putrefier, so you put the death hits on 5s or whatever the. Again, this isn't the podcast. This is my source is not a one for technical terms. So everyone in the comments, you can laugh and call me all the silly names under the sun for the fact that I describe things rather than remember the names. The ones where you auto wound on 5s to hit, basically. That does obviously level them up quite considerably, especially if they're fighting first as well, because at that instance, probably if you fight first with 5's auto wounding into Khorne Berserkers, yeah, you probably actually pick up the Khorne Berserkers, or if you don't, one Khorne Berserker fighting back into you, especially if you go for the 7-man Plague Marine squads. So, there's play basically. It's a different list archetype altogether. I don't really want the extra characters in this list because I'm skewing away from that. Like I say, I give away Bring It Down so much that, like, even a bad score on Bring It Down, like, you don't even have to kill half my army to get to max it. Like I say, I'm too far gone on that secondary, and so like I say, if someone took Cleanse or Teleport Homers and that, I'd have to really think about how I'd approach the game. But anyway, so this is it's been another solo one from Will, Poxwalker to Plague Marine. As I say, 2.5 out of 3, so second at both those tournaments. So hopefully I'm getting closer to earning my power armor. Maybe I've got one Death Guard branded shoulder pad right now that's very heavy for my weak Poxwalker body, and I'm very lopsided on one side because of it. Maybe next time I'll have the other shoulder pad, or maybe next time I've fixed secondaries are a complete disaster and I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't take them, or if you are going to take them, don't make the silly mistakes that I made. But obviously we've got lots of other content. I'm going to join Aidan very soon on the next Death Guard fundamental ones. Obviously it's Aidan's series, it's a solo one. I'm jumping in though because, as you can tell from this, I'm high on carnivores and I'm very much looking at the other allied units, and it is the allied one that we're going to do together, because that's more maybe where I have a bit more of a speciality than Aidan in that particular topic. Aidan's got some fantastic stuff coming out as well. He's doing generally 1 or 2 live streams a week, sometimes with a guest. Like I say, he does them at times a weekend. I'm not usually around to stream, so that's kind of Aidan's perfect time to stream. I know a lot of other people listen, so he gets guests on and just hobby hangouts and stuff like that. And also he's got his Perfect Plague series, and I think the next Perfect Plague is Space Marines, I think, or it might be that he's waiting a little bit longer to see how the meta builds come out with that, to sort of work out what he's doing. And then obviously we'll have some general episodes coming up too, where we maybe sort of like give a broad overview on the meta, how Death Guard fit into it. Maybe we'll have a bit of backwards and forwards discussion with me and Aidan about why Aidan thinks you should not run every demon engine, or not even where you shouldn't run 3 carnivores in every list and 3 predators, and then sort of build from there, and why 3 Plague Burst Crawlers is always better, and how I've just got lucky, and if I go to GT I'm going to get my pants pulled down. Maybe we'll have a discussion about that on the next one, I don't know. But anyway guys, thank you very much for listening. Like I say, you've listened to the ramblings of a madman for the last hour. Hopefully it's been coherent and cohesive. If it hasn't, as I say, leave a comment and I'll try and improve on the next one, assuming people actually care enough to listen. And if you don't, obviously this is a sort of side series. It's a bolt onto what Aidan's doing and what we're doing together. Like I say, I understand it isn't for everyone. Obviously some sort of higher level players probably listen to this and just think, why would anyone listen to this sort of crazy lunatic? But at the same time, as I told about my Mike Porter story from my very early tournament experiences, that was still a super fun event, even though I was described as a small child that got punched in the face. At the same time, I know the people listening might be in that same point of their journey, so I want to sort of reach out to you guys and sort of make it more from, this is a very, very ground up, maybe you haven't even been to your first event yet, and don't be scared of it. We always talk in this podcast, don't be scared to go to events. The best way to learn is to lose, but when you do lose, like I do in my practice game, think about why you lost, ask your opponent questions, go home, replay the game in your head, don't blame the dice. Sometimes dice happen, weird dice happen, but don't blame them. Think, how could you have done it? Could you have mitigated it? These are important things, and this is why we run this series and why we run this podcast. But anyway guys, thank you very much, and yeah, catch you in the next one.